Bầu garam macam begini ada.
Shall I wait for Madhvi Mataji to?
Now carry on.
Okay. So, thank you all very much for accepting this, even though I gave a presentation last month. So yeah, you're all very, very kind. This is for my Bhakti Vaibhav studies, but also for my spiritual growth. Hopefully, again, you will hear something that inspires you. I had to pick a topic from the Canto 5 and Canto 6 of Srimad Bhagavatam for my last presentation in this course, and I picked the story of Bharat Maharaj. I found it a very inspiring story in many ways. This episode is actually from the fifth canto. So the usual things, I will just skip some slides which are usually there. So the presentation style, I try to stick to is please. I think I explained it in the past. So lineage for Bharat Maharaj, I always try to figure out the lineage of these great personalities. So we had a few presentations like Brahma, Swayambhu Manu, Lord Kapila, and then last time I was trying to speak about the glories of Prithu Maharaj from Uttanapad's lineage. So that's on the right side. And finally, today I will attempt to speak a few words about Bharat Maharaj in the line of Swayambhu Manu and his son Priyavrata. Oh, and I forgot to say that I still need your blessings and well wishes because I feel unqualified to speak really. But I feel inspired at least, and hopefully you will also hear something inspiring, or maybe this will also inspire you to speak in the future, to give classes or talks. So very briefly about the lineage of Bharat Maharaj. So his father is Rishabhadev, who is none else than the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. So his incarnation, and his mother Jayanti. His consort is Panchajani. Bharat Maharaj's consort is Panchajani, and they had 5 sons. You can read the names there, and etymologically, the name of Bharat Maharaj means inhabitant of Bharat, which is typically understood as India. It's actually in the entire planet, but most commonly known as India. And I also wrote down something called Jad, which means stupid, dumb, or foolish. And I will explain later why that is. Actually, I will ask this question now. Do you know how many lives Bharat Maharaj had at this within the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in that context?
3.
3? That's Mataji. Which 3? What were those 3 lives?
Yeah, 3.
So do you know which were those 3 lives?
Was Bharat,
Yes.
then the last was Jad. It was called Jad. Bharat, and what's the third one?
And the third one was an animal?
Yeah, it was deer.
Yes, that's it. So those are the 3 lives. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, carry on.
Carry on, sorry.
Yeah. So this episode is explained in the 5th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. in chapters from chapter 7 to 14. So I will try to just go through them and what I learned from these stories. So these are the 3 lives. So first, in the first 2 chapters in this episode is King Bharat's life, and then his dear life, which is mentioned here as Dear Bharat, and finally Jad Bharat. So the 5-6 chapters about just Jad Bharat and his life and his teaching. So that was his final life. So the 7th chapter, it's the starting chapter of the yeah, thank you for the comment. So yeah, so it starts off in the 7th chapter of the 5th canto, this whole episode. So actually, India, what we know as India or Bharatvarsha was previously known as Ajanabhavarsha, and it actually got its name from Bharat Maharaj after ruling there. And as we have observed it a few times, these are perfect kings. So no complaint in their kingdom. They always took care of the citizens nicely, perfect administration in an exemplary way. But at the same time, he had a renowned spirit as well, following the footsteps of his father and grandfather. Father was Krishna's incarnation, Rishabhadev. So a very exalted family and lineage, and he was a great king. He ruled for many years actually. In that age, they were living a long life, but eventually he retired, even though he was young and strong, and because he developed the habit of this at the prime of his youth to renounce his family life and go to the forest, just as some of the other kings we have learned in the past, and to focus on meditation on Krishna and on Bhakti Yoga, to go back home, back to Godhead. So he had this great desire to develop Bhakti. So at the end of his life, it's actually not really the end. He was still in the prime of his youth. He renounced all these family connections and kingdom to accumulate spiritual thoughts and to develop that consciousness. Because basically at the time of death, our consciousness decides our thoughts, our next body, sorry. So our thoughts decide our next body. So he wanted to accumulate spiritual thoughts to attain Krishna. So one thing that stuck out for me from this is that he had royal opulence, great kingdom. He had a very affectionate mother, and he had a beautiful, young, chaste, and cultured wife as well, which is kind of like a dream wife from my understanding in the Vedic civilization. But still, he renounced all this just to dedicate his life exclusively to Krishna and in that mood. So he went to the forest and left all this. This is with great greed to remember Krishna. Yeah, so he went to a place called Pulashrama, which is near Hardwar. I'm actually not from that area. I'm a Western-born person, so I don't know much about this. But I heard that it's near a river called Gandaki, where the Shalagram Shilas are obtainable. And as mentioned before, India was basically named after him, this area of the earthly planet, Bhumandala, as they say. Yeah, so he went to the forest, he started meditating. He actually reached the stage of Bhava, which is the preliminary stage to Prema, which is the highest perfection. Krishna Prema, as we say at the end of after the 10 offenses we recite in the morning. That's what we are trying to achieve. Bhava is very close, so that's a preliminary stage. So he was really highly exalted. Bhava is like the stage of spiritual emotions. So there is still a little tinge in there, and in that stage also, but it's almost like a perfected state. So that's pretty much the prelude to his life in the 7th chapter and to his renunciation. And here comes the story about the deer, which some of you may have heard. So one day when he was taking bath in the morning, a deer came to the river to take water. And usually what I learned is deers like run in flocks together, basically in groups. And this time this deer was thirsty and alone. So yeah, disconnected from its flock. And the deer was just drinking basically water from the river. And obviously in forest and so on, deers are very afraid of more powerful or powerful strong animals like lion, tigers, and so on. So the deer suddenly heard a loud roar nearby. So he got very much afraid, very doubtful eyes, and he was thinking, are there some lions or tigers nearby? So the deer understood that there is some danger going on. So he stopped drinking. Natural reaction when you're afraid, we stop what we do and jumped on the other side of the river, basically as a natural instinct to escape. But this deer was actually pregnant. I think it's the mother deer is called like a doe in English, if I'm not mistaken. So she was pregnant, but because she was so afraid and pregnant and jumping over the river, actually she had a miscarriage. So small baby deer fell in the water of the river. And the doe was actually so much aggrieved, this deer, the mother deer, that he fell down in a cave and she immediately died. But the baby was still there in the river, flowing down the flow. So, and Bharat Maharaj was watching all this during his meditation. So he was observing it. And he became very compassionate about the motherless deer, baby deer. No mom, no dad. And for all practical purposes, the little deer, which is I think called fawn in English. Anyway, the small deer was helpless. So as a Vaishnava, we also recite after the 10 offenses in the morning that we are compassionate for the fallen conditioned souls. So Bharat Maharaj was compassionate, and so he actually picked up the flowing baby deer down the flow. So basically, he did save the deer's life, and he felt pity for it. So he used to be a king, so naturally this protection was very natural to him. So he brought the small deer to his ashram, feeling the compassion. It's a good thing for pious people to feel compassion for the poor creatures. So he started feeding the deer with grass. He patted the deer, put the deer on his lap. So really caring, made the deer, really comfortable. And yeah, so he basically saw the deer as another child of God, Krishna. So he felt the duty to protect the deer, really. And so with compassion is fine, but Bharat Maharaj's affection for the deer grew day by day as the days went by, and slowly, he started forgetting about his sadhana and his devotional service. So his sadhana actually slackened as he became more and more compassionate and caring for the deer. So if I should have given a different title for the presentation, one of the titles I could have given is Misplaced Compassion. So this is an example of the philosophy of misplaced compassion. So compassion is definitely good, but because he wanted to protect the surrendered, but the challenge is that he started forgetting about his sadhana. So it became, thank you, T. So that became like a mundane attention to the deer, which is not good, frivolity of the animal. So it's noble, it's definitely noble to be compassionate, but maybe not over compassionate. So we should definitely show compassion. So I'm not trying to carry the message that we now shouldn't have others and so on, but just in, in context. So not prioritize it over our sadhana too much, and that we forget about that side of the activities completely. So yeah, so give too much importance to the deer, and also she started feeling self-importance, that he's like the savior of the deer, and so he started developing that mentality. And again, nothing wrong with helping others in difficulty on behalf of Krishna, but it's not we are not really the doers, not taking that position. It's actually Krishna's position, and in reality, to protect others, we are just instruments. And so his Krishna consciousness basically got sidelined, and you can see that he gave up his royal paraphernalia when he renounced the world. A beautiful, young, chaste, cultured wife, really caring, affectionate mother. So he was so detached, almost achieving prema. He was already at the bow stage, in the doorstep, but still just a deer. And he really got attached to the deer. So he thought about the deer. The deer is helpless. The deer is alone. It has taken my shelter, totally dependent on me. The deer has full faith in me. And then he started thinking about himself that, yeah, I'm selfless, just helping the deer. I need to protect, I need to gratify the deer, I have to fondle it. So how could I neglect it? So, yeah, so even while doing puja and ceremonies, he became very disturbed. He was looking back while doing the puja to the deer. Is the deer okay? So he got really attached, spent so much time with the deer. And he was always afraid that the deer would be eaten by tigers and wolves in the forest. So whenever he went to take a bath, he would take the deer with him. And when they would walk, he would make sure that the deer walks on a soft path, and he would walk himself on the rough path. So he compromised his personal comfort and not just spiritual life. And by doing puja, he would come up periodically to see, where is the deer? Is he okay? So you see, he lost the focus, he lost the concentration on his spiritual duties as well. So yeah, the deer was sleeping on his chest. He frequently kept it on his lap. He became very, very protective. Yeah, so yeah, this is getting a bit too much of attention and care. So this can happen to us as well. WhatsApp messages can distract us while chanting. We look at WhatsApp messages, who wrote what, and sometimes it's not very important, but we still look anyway. We can't just switch off for half an hour, speaking of myself. And yeah, being very much attached to these external things. But obviously, ultimately, the aim of life is to remember Krishna and develop thoughts. So although Bharat was very, very exalted, he fell down like that. One day, Bharat Maharaja went somewhere in the forest. Let's see what my next slide is. Okay, so one day Bharat Maharaja went to the forest, and then he returned to the ashram, but he couldn't find deer. So you can imagine his heart was broken, He became very worried. Where is the deer? The prince has left him. Where is the prince? No auspicious left anymore for him. Was he taken away by tigers, wolves? He couldn't see the deer. What happened to the deer? When will the deer return? Is it safe? And so on. So all these thoughts came to his mind. So, the remembrance of playing with the deer and so on. So he got like a bit like too much, in the mind. So because of the lamentation and separation. So that day he was searching for the deer everywhere, and then he slipped and fell to the ground. And the deer became visible to him in front of his eyes, not in reality, in his mind, basically. And like his son, little son. So he remembered this when he actually left his life. So this is how he left his life. He basically died after slipping, and he remembered the deer. So what do we learn from the Bhagavad Gita? There is this famous verse in the Bhagavad Gita, 8th chapter 6, verse 6. Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam jajatyante kalevaram tam tameveti konteya sadatad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. So this is how we come to the life of the deer. So the first life is gone. Again, he left his life in that consciousness. And one of the things I learned also from this story is that Bharat Maharaja was alone. So when we do mistakes or we fall down, if we are amongst devotees, we can always get feedback. Devotees can correct us. They can give guidance, mentorship. But unfortunately, Bharat Maharaj didn't have this opportunity. So that's why it was also easy for him to fall down. So for me, one of the lessons from this is devotee association is so powerful, because when we start going down, we can always be checked. We can always be corrected by the mercy of other Vaishnavas, our mentors, our gurus. So yeah, that's one lesson I learned personally from this story. And just to review this, so I just briefly read it up. So he was Bharat's attachment. So he was the compassion, forgetfulness, neglect of his spiritual duties, too much affection, attraction, distraction from the spiritual activities, agitation, what the deer is doing, anxiety, is it okay? Lamentation, when he couldn't find the deer, and actually left his life. And Bharat Maharaj Moha, illusion. I think Moha means illusion. Someone could correct me if I'm wrong, but yeah, he was thinking that the deer is a prince. Feigning meditation, enjoying this angry love. I didn't speak about that, but there was some exchange as well. Then the deer was doing something mischievous, then that sort of thing. Son of a saint, praising deer's footprints as well, and he would see that, glorifying the moon for protecting the deer, deer's submissive son. And he had these false conceptions about this fever of separation. So then he got the life of a deer. So about his deer life, one thing I can say is he was remembering actually everything in his previous life, which is very strange, or not strange. Nothing is strange because Krishna can do everything, but unusual. It was a special concession for his devotee that he could remember his previous birth. So he actually, when he took birth as a deer, he left the deer Bharat left the deer family, very early on, and the deer actually went to the Pula ashram, where Bharat Maharaj spent his years of meditation. So he wouldn't eat what a deer would normally eat. He would just eat dry leaves and do tapasya, even as a deer. And this is to make up for the mistakes he did in his previous birth. So yeah, he could remember his previous life, but he wouldn't disclose it to anyone, not even to his dear family. So in Pulashram as well, he was listening to the classes behind the bushes, to the saintly people's classes. Again, very unusual from a deer, but it is possible. Sometimes we have these stories about animals taking advantage of devotee association and so on. So yeah, in this way, he tried to kind of correct his mistake, lamenting how fool I was. And I'm trying to be more careful now, more complete repentance. So yeah, so eventually the deer got the association of devotees this time. So obviously it wasn't an ordinary deer, actually a saintly deer. Krishna gave him this remembrance as well. So actually, deer Bharat was more spiritually advanced than King Bharat. So even though a deer, even though an animal, he was actually more advanced in consciousness. And his consciousness was protected by Krishna. I mean, on the material plane, it may seem like a degradation, but on the spiritual plane, this was actually an elevation. And then finally, when he gave up his life as a deer, he didn't just yet run back. He didn't just yet go back to Krishna, to Vaikuntha or Goloka Vrindavan, but took birth again, but this time in a human body. And yeah, he took birth in a Brahmana family. Actually, this is also another thing. I don't have the exact scripture reference, but it's also known when we do devotional service, Krishna gives us the chance to either get a birth in an aristocratic family or in a devotee family, Brahmana family, so we can carry on where we left off. So this is the opportunity that Bharat Maharaj got after the deer body. So we are coming to his third life. So before I explain this photo, sorry, this is a bit scary photo, a bit like Narasimhadev photo. So please bear with me if you can, just for a moment. So he took birth as Jad Bharat in a devotee family, a Brahmana family. I actually don't know his father's name. If any of you know, please let me know. I have never heard it in classes or scriptures, but he was born to a Brahmana father. And then his name was Jad Bharat this time. So this is what I mentioned previously, Jad, which means dumb, stupid, foolish. I will explain what it means. But yeah, he took birth as a Brahmana son. And so he went through the transmigration of a Kshatriya king as King Bharat, an animal, which is deer Bharat, and finally becoming a Brahmana, Jad Bharat. So his Brahmana father had two wives, and he was actually the son from the second wife, so from the younger wife. And Jad Bharat's father was very affectionate, actually. But Jad Bharat was showing himself as a deaf and dumb person, behaving like that. Do you know why? Do you know why he may have showed himself as a very dumb, very dull person, even though he was elevated? Does anyone know? So this was he was actually an avadut, but he, just like Haridas Thakur, for example, I'm not sure if it was Haridas Thakur, but I remember stories someone sitting, for example, behind the public toilet, I think might be Haridas Thakur, so that others don't come close to him, that doesn't distract him. And it's especially important for Jad Bharat because he was distracted by the deer, so he didn't want to give Maya a chance this time at all. So he wasn't actually, when his Brahmana father tried to teach him things like the Gayatri mantra for 4 months, just one line, he was not responding. He was not reciprocating. He was closing himself out of this, disregarding all social protocols. So this was his very special portfolio in devotional service. Yeah, so his father couldn't teach him anything, he was a very affectionate father. He tried really hard to show how to perform sacrifices, how to be a first-class Brahmana, to train him very nicely, but he just didn't want to get material association anymore. And So actually, it's interesting how his father was as attached to him as he was to the deer uh, in that previous life. So yeah, and also his brother tried to teach him Achman, not even Achman, he would not learn even that. And Achman is very simple. Even the kids can learn that. The children can learn that, but nothing really. So, and he didn't dress himself properly and so on. So what happened is one day in this way, his father was attached to family, but so he forgot about death. His father, death didn't forget about his father. So his father passed away. So yeah, death will eventually not forget any of us. So yeah, so his father passed away. He remained with his stepmother because the second mother went after his father. Usual thing, entering the fire and so on. That we also learned in Prithu Maharaj's case. And so yeah, he stayed with his stepbrothers, but his stepbrothers were very, very mean to him actually, giving him burnt rice and food with mold on it. And yeah, it's not very good, like spoiled food basically, with worms and all that. And they engaged him in very hard work. But Bharat Maharaj didn't care for anything. He said it's okay. He ate whatever he could. And one day his stepbrothers sat him on a farm the whole night actually. And I can't remember the English word. Is it like scarecrow? They even made like scarecrow out of him and things like scarecrow or something like that. It's like basically for the birds and so on. But one day in the evening when his brothers made him to like supervise the farm so that no one comes and steal, some dacoits appeared. So they were like, these dacoits were like Kali's devotees, and they were sacrificing actually human animals to Kali, which is very degraded, but they were doing that. They had someone to sacrifice, but that person actually escaped. So they concocted their own worship of Kali basically. But the person they wanted to sacrifice, that person escaped. So they were looking someone. Somehow or other, they came through Bharat Maharaj. And he actually looked like a human animal, because externally, like, not very caring, but he actually had a very strong and stout body. So he was human, but still looking like an animal, like a careless animal. So they actually took Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj didn't protest at all, even though he was very strong, so he could have beaten up all the dacoits, but he didn't care. So the dacoits finally happy finding someone. They bathed him, put garland on him, fed him very sumptuously, and they brought him in front of Kali. And they actually, in this ceremony, they just took the knife to cut off his head, and he was still not like opposing, very, very, very elevated stage. And they wanted to kill him, and he thought he thought that everything is in Krishna's hand. So if my head remains, it remains Krishna's mercy. If I have to be decapitated, then I will lose my head. That's also Krishna's mercy. So he was thinking in this way. So the dacoits took their swords to cut his head, and at that time, Kali appeared from the Murti or deity to save actually Jad Bharat. And actually, Kali appeared with several forms, dozen forms, and cut off the dacoits' heads and played with their heads like bowls and drank the blood of the dacoits and so on. So Jad Bharat was saved. And Kali saved Jad Bharat because actually Kali is also a devotee of Krishna. So in the end of the day, even Kali serves Krishna. So Krishna's devotees are very dear to him. So Kali was also under the influence under Krishna. So again, Bhagavad Gita verse is a verse where it says, "This material nature is one of my energies." I will probably speed up a bit. I'm sorry, I just realized the time. Yeah. So this is an illustration, or like how the basically Kali saves Jad Bharat, killing the dacoits. As I mentioned, it's very similarly scary to the Singadev pastime, but yeah, it's actually a very similar story. God appearing, saving a Vaishnava, so like that. So Nisingadev is not the only scary pastime at first. This on the illustration, right? And this is the final, for me at this person, the final part of Jod Bharat's life. So it's a big discussion. I'm not going to go into teachings. But then one day there was a king on a palanquin, and they were going to a saintly place. So here's Bhagavatam classes, Kapila Ashram actually. So the king was on the palanquin, and there were four palanquin carriers on four sides of the palanquin. And one of them got some physical issues, so he could no longer carry the palanquin. So they needed urgently someone to carry the palanquin. So sounds like Jod Bharat is always in the, in the good place at a good time. Some challenge comes up. So they just found on the riverside. It was actually on the river Iksumati. Again, I'm not from India. I don't know where it is. But Jod Bharat was there meditating. And because these Shudras lost one carrier, they actually forcefully took Jod Bharat to carry the palanquin, not palanquin. So yeah, he joined again. No opposition. He joined just fine. But there was one issue. So when he lifted the palanquin and they started walking, he was again very affectionate, but this time towards ants on the walking, then scrolling on the pavement. Well, it's not even pavement, it's just like ground that time. And so he was looking every 2-3 steps, not even just not stepping on the ants, but even before potentially stepping on ants, he was looking. So you can imagine the other Shudras, they were not really caring about this. So the carrying of the palanquin became a bit wobbly and a bit uneven. So whoever sits in the palanquin, he can also feel that, the palanquin is wobbling. And the king became very angry. What's going on? And the carriers, the Shudra carriers said, nothing is wrong with us. And this new person who just joined us, he's walking erratically. So he's doing all this trouble. So the palanquin was swinging to and fro in this way, very much imbalanced. And the king started like shouting and using filthy language, why are you not lifting this properly? And the carriers became very afraid of punishment, except Jad Bharat. So then the king said, now carry me nicely. So he became really angry. Because, puffed up a king, not like a great king. And Jad Bharat didn't say anything during the chastisement. He just kept walking. And he again saw the end, so his mind wouldn't change, of course. So the palanquin became wobbly again, and in a haphazard way, he carried the palanquin in this way, but this time the king became really, really angry, and he started criticizing Jad Bharat in a very sarcastic way, actually. Oh, you haven't been carrying me a long distance. You must be extremely tired. You are carrying alone. Obviously, he's not carrying alone. He didn't carry long distance because he just joined. He couldn't be extremely tired because he just joined. So it was very sarcastic, very ironic. It's not a nice critic, very sarcastic statement. But then finally, Jad Bharat decided to break his silence that followed his entire life in this body, in this Jad Bharat body. And he started giving some teachings to the king that, I'm not actually this body. You're criticizing my body. That's okay. I'm actually not this body. And he started saying that you are now the king, I'm the servant, but in the next life you could be the servant, I could be the king. And anyway, this palanquin is an earth, our body, one element in it is earth as well. So yeah, we become earth anyway. Well, the body, not we, the soul, not our identity, but the externals will become earth. It comes from earth anyway. So what's the point of, chastising me? I'm a madman anyway. And so it's like a madman just becomes more mad. So it's like beating a dead horse. And yeah, so yeah, we recite this prasadam prayer also when we honor prasadam. Like there is this line in this Sharira Vidya Jal. Does anyone know what that means in the prasadam prayer? Sharira Vidya Jal. So this means it's this body is a lump of ignorance, actually. So he gave these teachings to, oh, I forgot to say the name of the king. I'm really sorry. That's actually important. But you can see on the slides. Okay, so I'm saying. So his name is Maharaj Rahugan. Maharaj Rahugan. So he started, finally, when the king understood this, he actually fell down from the palanquin, and he fell at the feet of Jadbarat, like flat like a rod, basically. He understood that this is actually a special person, and he started inquiring, who are you? Are you Kapila Dev? Are you Prithu Maharaj? And so on. So he started understanding that this is not a special person. And one could ask, why did Jadbarat started speaking this time? Because he always kept quiet. Well, His Holiness Devamrita Maharaj says that sometimes devotees' mercies are, it can't be explained. They can come at any point. But also, I think in this case,
in France.
Jadbarat felt that maybe Maharaj Rahugan will actually listen to him, and so he will take these instructions. So that's why he opened up. And in this connection, I heard a very wonderful story. Maybe I will leave at that after I say the story, if it turns out long. But I heard a very nice story in my Bhakti Vaibhav studies from the teachers. So there was one PhD scholar in, again, I have to say, I'm typically not emotional very much, or at least I think like that. But this story was also very nice when I heard it. So there was a PhD scholar who went to Vrindavan to meet Swami, sannyas, and he wanted to take initiation from this sadhu. So he was basically an aspiring disciple. So he went to the sadhu and said, I want to become your disciple. Please initiate me. Give me diksha. And then the sadhu gave him one instruction. Please find someone lesser than you in the whole of Vrindavan. Find someone who is a little inferior to you, then I will give you initiation. So he thought, PhD scholar, no brainer, that's easy. I'm a PhD scholar anyway. So obviously I can find many people, a bunch of people who are inferior to me, who are lesser than me in every respect. And so he starts searching. After he saw many scholars. So he said, okay, not think of them. Maybe they're equals. So he saw a rickshawala. And he thought, okay, he must be lesser than me. I'm a PhD scholar, so surely he's just a rickshawala. He's just pulling the rickshaw. He's just getting some money, not even big amounts. He must be lesser than me, he says. But then he started thinking, although he's a rickshawala, he's a dhamvasi, so basically he lives in a saintly place. So he's staying in Vrindavan. So how could he be lesser than me? No, he's not lesser than me. So then he goes and sees other people, animals, etc. And finally he's convinced that not going to be able to find any person lesser than him. So he was a little morose because he really wanted to get initiated and so on. So the next day when he was evacuating, he saw a worm in his stool. And he thought, oh, finally, Krishna sent me someone who's lesser than me. So this worm must be lesser than me. But then again, he starts thinking, he starts thinking that I'm eating Krishna prasadam and I'm converting it into abominable stool. But this worm is actually surviving on that stool. So this worm is actually utilizing waste. And I have no capacity to utilize waste. We don't need stool like worms. I'm only producing waste actually. And this worm is surviving on the waste. So actually, unfortunately, even the worm is superior to me. So he's finally convinced that no one is inferior to me in Vrindavan Dham. So he gave up his initiation, his purpose after so many tries. And then he goes back to the sadhu and says, I'm really sorry. I couldn't find anyone less than me. I thought everyone is superior to me, including the worm in my stool. And then finally the sadhu said, now you're actually qualified for initiation. So yeah, that was like also a story which I heard from the teachers, and such a wonderful story. And just to finish this off, then Jad Bharat is giving further instructions to Maharaj Rahugan about the mind, the functions of the mind, about bhakti, about other things. So this goes on for 2 chapters. It's philosophy. It's worth reading if you want to get deeper into the mind functions and so on. So and then maybe just 1 or 2 minutes, and then I will finish off with this. So at the end, he also speaks about something called the material forest. So that's what you see at the top of this illustration. It's actually an allegorical story. His Holiness Devamrita Maharaj said that it's not like the Vrindavan forest where Krishna's pastimes are happening. It's actually the opposite. So he contrasts this in one of his classes, the forest of material enjoyment and the forest of Vrindavan, where Krishna executes his eternal pastimes. So I'm going to skip all that because I'm conscious of times. This could be actually a separate topic on its own. It's the last 2 chapters in this episode. So chapter 13 and 14. 13 is like kind of like an overview by Jad Bharat to King Rahugan. And 14 is like a detailed explanation of the same allegorical story, because Parikshit Maharaj asked Sukadeva Goswami that please explain this story more to me, to relish this more. So I'm just gonna skip the slides here. There are many analogies and comparisons given. So, and then finally he speaks about that bhakti is the only way out of this forest of material forest. Basically, it's a foreign place for us. And so then Sukadeva Goswami goes into the details, and I think that's pretty much the end of the episode. And then finally, the lessons I personally learned from this, the takeaways for myself. You might even take more things out of this than me. But some of the things I took away while studying this episode, the misplaced compassion, definitely. Compassion, but in a healthy proportion. We should never neglect our spiritual life for entirely material affection. And we need to develop detachment rather than attachment. Well, actually, this is also in context because attachment to Krishna is great. Learn from mistakes. So Bharat Maharaj definitely learned life after life. He learned from his mistakes, not to commit them again. Be always very alert and attentive while doing services, being in a class, so on and so on. tolerant and persistent in faith in Krishna. So Bharat Maharaj in his Jad Bharat life, he was very tolerant of the various difficulties, stepbrothers, dacoits, King Rahugan, etc., etc. Chant and remember Krishna, very, very important. Avoid Vaishnava Parad, actually, like King Rahugan or other people offending him. Importance of devotee association, 100%. So if we're alone, we can fall down much easier, like Bharat Maharaj with the deer. Don't judge by externals. We learned that in past classes with several personalities. The spirit's all different from the body. No loss in devotional service, very basic but very important, very hope-giving, big relief as well for us practicing devotees. And this is probably a lesson for more for newcomers, but reincarnation does exist. And the last thing I will mention, shameless plug, but this episode also inspired Devamrita, His Holiness Devamrita Maharaj, to write a short book about particularly Jad Bharat and Rahugan's conversation. It's called Perfect Escape. So if you ever get the chance, it's a great read on the topic. It's actually not long at all. It's 90 something pages, 95 or something, but it's something that inspired his life. So it's one of his books. I think I saw 3 books only from him. It's one of them. So and by the way, he's a very, very jolly Swami. I don't know, I always see him laughing in classes. And we also have his disciples in Saho, 2 brahmacharis. So with that, I'd like to give all the credits to Her Grace Padre Mataji and His Grace Satyanarayana Prabhu for supporting this and supporting all of us actually to give classes. It's never enough said because it's so amazing opportunity for us, I feel. And of course to the Bhakti Vaibhav teachers, primarily to Gauranga Darshan Prabhu and his illustration. I took some of his illustrations into these slides, incorporated them. So that's what I have for you for today. Sorry to run over. Bharat Maharaja Ki Jai.